All right, what's going on? Drive time on a Wednesday afternoon. Sunny and a little bit warmer today than it has been over the past 72 hours here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, outside our Broadway Media Studios. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson behind the glass today. We have a short show for you guys. Bit of a sprint instead of our 4-hour typical marathon this afternoon. We're going to make way for Utah basketball coming up at about 3:30. You'll hear pregame coverage between the Utes and the Houston Cougars. Houston's one of the best teams in the country, a national championship contender, a Final Four contender, certainly. So we'll get into that game on the program today as we will bring that to you early. A lot to do between now and then, though. Utah Jazz made a trade. It's weird. These pieces of breaking news have come down like with 2 seconds left in the show. So try to do what you can to make sense of the news that came down. But we'll talk about it today. The Jazz made a trade with the Phoenix Suns. What exactly does it mean? Why would they do it? And what could be next for, quite frankly, both teams? Obviously, the trade deadline is coming up February the 6th. It is right around the corner. And a lot of conversations about trades the Jazz could be involved in. So we'll give you some thoughts on that today on the program. One day closer to Conference Championship Sunday in pro football. Don't forget, we are your home of the biggest and best football events, whether it's college or pro. So you're going to hear the games on our radio station. Coming up on Sunday for the right to go to the Super Bowl. Coming up, it's the Commanders and the Eagles live in Philadelphia, starting at 1 o'clock Mountain Time on Fox. Philly's a 6.5-point favorite in that game. The line hasn't moved much. The line moved towards Kansas City yesterday, and the Chiefs are now a 2-point favorite of the Buffalo Bills at Arrowhead for the second straight year. Those two teams play for the AFC Championship. So one day closer, of course, to the weekend and to a little pro football. The Utah Jazz are in action tonight, taking on one of, if not the best teams in the entire NBA, Oklahoma City, 6 o'clock Mountain Time start. So you get a little Utah basketball tonight or this afternoon at 4 o'clock against Houston. You'll get a little Utah OKC as well. And we've got a lot to do on the program between now and 3:25. The New York Jets have a coach. Definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Aaron Glenn seems like a good dude, played for the Jets in the 90s. Another first-time head coach with a defensive background, and so far, that has not gone well. Could Pete Carroll be heading to coach the Raiders? A lot of rumors in that direction, too. So we're going to bring in Zach Harper today, NBA Daily Assist style. We'll talk about what the Jazz did with the Suns, what could be next for Utah, and is Jimmy Butler on his way to Phoenix now. So we'll bring in Zach Harper. Neil Smith stops by. We talk to Neil every week about the NHL and the Utah Hockey Club. Utah Hockey Club is off tonight. They're back in action tomorrow on the road, just completing a 7-game homestand and only got 2 wins there. So Minnesota, good team. We'll take on Utah tomorrow. That game is on ESPN Plus and also Hulu, as the NHL also kind of makes their way into these streaming/linear broadcast situations. So quick show, 90 minutes today on a Wednesday. Zach Harper, Neil Smith, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, breaking news as we ended the show. It seems like I don't know what it's been over the past few weeks, like the Title IX ruling came down as we were finishing the show. Jazz made a trade. A lot of conversation about it. We were ending the show as the news came down. Where are you at with it today after kind of digesting it?
Yeah, as you mentioned, awkward timing for us on the end of the shows lately, and that's part of the afternoon drive deal. Usually, a lot of times you're ending the show while games are in progress or people are news dumping things at 5 p.m. as we hang up. But, I like how you laid it out a little bit in crosstalk with Scott. It's something that, of course, when you're trading for picks, when you're trading for draft capital, and you're trading picks that you don't necessarily know where they're going to land, Spence, you're taking a gamble. It's a gamble. But it's a gamble that could move the Jazz up into the drafts, and I think it's a gamble worthwhile because of the talent in the top end of NBA drafts in today's game. It's a different story, Spence, than 15, 20 years ago. And I know there's some pushback still to that, but just the sports science of, maybe the demeanors of players is different. But we're talking about just athletic prospects. They're better now than they've ever been. Go look at the top 5 in the draft a few years ago with Anthony Edwards. And I mean, if you miss on a top 5 pick, there's something wrong. Whereas 15 years ago, sometimes it was hard. There's one standout or two. It's different now. And I like moving up, getting some draft capital that could be at the top end of the NBA draft rather than the bottom half, because I do think that the talent it's just different, and the Jazz are looking to capitalize on that.
Unprotected picks in pro basketball are like unicorns, so I think I think most people agree that the Jazz did something that makes a lot of sense. Now, only time will tell if it works, but we'll get into it as we have a good NBA guest on the show today. But before Zach Harper joins us, courtesy of our good friend, Standard Restaurant Supply, your one-stop shop for all your tailgate needs. On a short Wednesday show, it's time now for your opening tip. NBA trade deadline is right around the corner. It is on February the 6th, so just about 2 weeks away or so-ish, thereabouts. And the Utah Jazz are rumored to be part of a bunch of potential hypothetical deals. Of course, those are only rumors. We can only talk about what we know and what's already gone down. So as we were saying goodnight last night in the 5 o'clock hour, breaking news, Sham Sharani at ESPN, the Phoenix Suns receive a 2025 first-round pick from the Jazz, in addition to a 2027 first-round pick and a 2029 first-round pick. In exchange, Utah receives a 2031 first-round pick from the Suns. On the surface, it's like, what exactly are we doing here? But when you dig into it, it makes a lot of sense. So in all three drafts, 25, 27, and 29, the picks the Suns receive will be the least favorable of Utah, Minnesota, and Cleveland. Okay, that's the deal with all three of these picks and all three of these drafts. If you're Danny Ainge, if you're Justin Zanuck, if you're part of the Jazz front office, you've simply done your calculation on mostly Cleveland and Minnesota a little bit, but Minnesota is getting a little bit older, and even that pick this year for the Jazz could be late lottery. The Cleveland Cavaliers pick this year might be the last pick in the first round. And Cleveland has a lot of good young players. Nobody knows how things could change during the course of any offseason, but this is the Jazz doing their calculation on the Cavs mostly and saying, we believe on all three of these, in all three of these draft cycles, 25, 27, and 29, we believe the least favorable of these three picks are most likely going to be late first round, 25 to 30 thereabouts. So we're fine giving away three picks that are probably going to be 25 to 30. That's our calculation to Phoenix in exchange for an unprotected pick of theirs in 2031. Unprotected picks are like unicorns in pro basketball. If you can grab one, you got to do it. And the Jazz have probably done their calculation on the Phoenix Suns, and you understand that Kevin Durant at 36 and Bradley Beal at 31 and Devin Booker in his late 20s, there's a good chance that this pick that's unprotected from Phoenix in 2031 comes during a year where they're probably going to need to be pivoting or maybe even full-on rebuilding the way the Jazz are now. Is that a guarantee? Of course it's not. Matt Ishbia, who just bought that team, seems to be a very willing owner as far as spending money, and he's probably going to do everything he can to make sure the Suns are as competitive as they can be every single year, but that's not a guarantee. And the NBA is cyclical. We're seeing it here right now. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, sometimes you're trying to get back up as much as quick as you can, but it's not that easy to do. And the Suns have found themselves in scenarios similar to where the Jazz find themselves now. Your veteran players either age on or they want to get paid and they move on, or something happens in the locker room and you decide to pivot, kind of the way that it happened here with Gobert and Mitchell. Things happen all the time, but there's a really good chance the Jazz just traded 3 late first-round picks for an unprotected draft asset in 2031 that might be really, really special. And if you're the Jazz, you have to lean in on every possible scenario to try to finally, and you need Lady Luck, the way the Jazz haven't had Lady Luck yet. 9 lottery appearances, the Jazz have never moved up. At some point, that has to change. And you give yourself as many options as possible. You give yourself as the best odds possible to finally land that pick that could change things. And that's what makes a process like this worth it. The problem is when you look at processes like this around the league, the Philadelphia 76ers did the very same thing. It took them 5 full years to finally get the pick and the player that changed their roster and their franchise, and that was Joel Embiid. Now, Obviously, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. This is not a Philadelphia 76er topic. You get the gist. This is all about trying to find that one pick that could finally be the pick that changes the Jazz organization. Because in the past, they've had to rely on savvy draft and talent evaluation in spots in the draft where you don't typically get great players. Late lottery Mitchell, late first round Gobert, John and Carl, both mid to late first round picks. You get the deal. Kirilenko, second round pick. The only top 5 pick they've really developed in the modern day of the Jazz has been Darren, and they traded him because he and Jerry got loose. Find the pick that ends up to be the Victor Wembanyama. Find the pick that ends up to be the Cooper Flagg. Find the pick that ends up to be the A.J. Debinsa, and then we're on our way. But until then, you're spinning your wheels. You're running around one of those mouse wheels, and just, every single year you're winning 30, 35 games and drafting 8, 9, 10, 11. That's the way to find Keontae George. That's the way to find Taylor Hendricks. That's the way to find really nice role players. And we're simply playing the percentages because, of course, there are exceptions. There are late lottery picks that turn into be some of the best picks that we've ever seen. The best player in the world right now is drafted in the second round. It's not the only way to do this, but it's giving yourself the best chance to do it, juxtaposed to the way you've done it lately, because you have to base this on the way teams have been built. And great championship teams draft, they develop, and they retain. But championship teams have one of those generational pieces, and that's what the Jazz don't have, and that's, quite frankly, what the Jazz haven't had for a long, long time, depending on how you analyze Donovan right now. This is one of the rare deals in pro basketball that I get why Phoenix does it. Phoenix, prior to this trade, had one draft asset to trade, and it was a second-round pick because they went all in to get Durant, Booker, and Beal together. Now Phoenix has 3 first-round picks they can either utilize to add talent via the draft that's affordable because they paid a lot of money to their 3 big stars. The draft is a great way to add talent without having to pay top dollar yet because they're on rookie deals for 3 years with a 4th year that's a team option. So Phoenix has the chance to use these picks to add affordable young talent, or they now have something interesting to call Miami about if they want to get Jimmy Butler. The Jimmy Butler deal is probably going to be complicated. The Jazz actually could be involved because I think Miami and Phoenix are going to need a 3rd or a 4th team for salary implications. Think about when the Jazz traded for Russell Westbrook and Derrick Rose and waived them. The Jazz could be a team that absorbs a contract, and they could say, okay, we'll take the player and the player's contract, but you got to send a first-round pick with that player, right? I mean, the Jazz are actually in a really, really good spot. The problem is all this is hypothetical because if we get to 2031 and Phoenix wins 55 games and it's the 26th pick, this was a bad move. We won't know until 2031 is what I'm saying. So strap in for the next 6 years. It doesn't change anything for right now. It just puts the Jazz once again in a really good spot, hypothetically, down the road if things go their way for once. If the ping pong balls bounce their way for once. If Lady Luck shines on the Jazz for once, then we'll look back on deals like this and say, okay, it worked, right? But in the meantime, it's one of those deals where if you're Phoenix, you do it. If you're Utah, you do it, and I get it. We'll bring in Zach Harper coming up on the other side to continue to kind of break this stuff down. We'll do a little Utah Hockey Club with Neil Smith later on. We say good afternoon at about 3:25 in time for Utah basketball as they're taking on the Houston Cougars. Halfway through your work week, one day closer to the weekend, you got it dialed into the drive on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. I'm too tired today to even fight it. I really am. We're on night 3 of Lil
Back
Duke.
up.
Don't do that. Okay, don't force the issue. I'm
Got
just
it.
saying we're on night 3 of the station mascot Duke, a little stomach issue, so he's waking me up every 2 hours, which I appreciate because I'd rather have him go outside to go to the bathroom. But I'm too tired to fight the pit bull thing today, so I'm just going to
Don't fight it. Embrace it.
Yeah, but don't sing. Don't sing Pitbull on air. That's embarrassing for all of us. We're playing Pitbull because Zach Harper joins us. By the way, just real quick before I forget, we have the number now. Notre Dame, Ohio State, 22.1 million viewers. That's 3 million less than Michigan, Washington last year, and it's got to be Monday night, January 20th, as opposed to January 8th last year. So kind of interesting stuff. Zach Harper, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Pitbull was playing. I'm excellent.
Do you watch college football at all?
I do, but I got to be honest. I had no interest in Ohio State versus Notre Dame. Once it got to that point, I just, for whatever reason, I don't really have a reason per se. I just wasn't interested in either side winning.
Do you think it had anything to do with the fact that the CFP playoff started 7 years ago? I mean,
it's been a while, man.
Yeah, dude. Like last year, the final was on January 8th, and it drew more eyes. I think a lot of people like you may have just been over it because I think it just was kind of extended out way too long.
Yeah, and it's tough in a tournament format, and I do want to give it a couple of years to see if this is the right way. But it's funny. Like I know this is a bad criticism, but it kind of felt like there were too many teams in it to me. I was good at just 4. Like, I really was. I was good at just 4. And then they're like, we're doing it at 12. I'm like, all right, whatever. Let's check it out. And then, yeah, maybe it was just it was 2 months of college football playoff. And I guess I just got, a little tired of it.
What's the pie chart look like for the Zach Harper sports consumption? How much of it is pro basketball?
Oh, man. I mean, it's a lot. Like, I don't even really watch college anymore. I used to try to keep up with as much college as possible, and I can't do it anymore. For pro sports, it's probably 85% NBA, 10% NFL. We'll sprinkle some baseball in there. We'll sprinkle a little bit of college here and there. My dad's a big Georgia Bulldogs fan, so I will watch Georgia games and talk with him about it, just out of necessity. But yeah, it's pretty much all NBA all the time.
Fair enough. So, Zach, the Jazz made a blockbuster move.
They did.
Well, they did not make a blockbuster trade, but they made a trade. And it was the news broke right as I was signing off. So I was trying to drink through a fire hose. And now that, I've been able to kind of read about it and listen to people break it down, you get why they do it. Now, there's no guarantees, right? But they obviously have done their calculation on probably Cleveland mainly. And they've said, okay, we think this year that might be the 30th pick. 2 years, it's probably still late first round. Who knows in 4 years? But Cleveland's good. They're young. They're well coached. So I guess, Zach, they're like, all right, we'll give Phoenix 3 picks we believe are late first rounders for the chance that in 2031 they're in a pivot situation or a rebuild situation. And we get an unprotected first, which is kind of like a unicorn these days, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, you don't get a lot of those. And there's been a lot of teams recently who are kind of just banking on Phoenix is not going to figure this out long term, right? You've seen teams kind of poach some first round picks, future firsts out of them over the last year or two, and I think it's this belief. I was thinking about it earlier today, and I think I've come to the realization that if you made me a billionaire and I bought a team, I would run it the exact same way that Matt Ishbia is. Just reckless decisions. Who cares about the future? I just want to try to win now. I don't really know how to do that, but I'm going to try. Look, I got a couple of really good players. Let's try to get another player. Who cares what the collective bargaining rules are? It does feel like a very impulsive person. And I think people around the league see the spot that the Suns are in, see the kind of urgency or desperation that they seem to be operating with. And in theory, they didn't make a bad trade, right? That you acquire 3 other first-round picks in order to kind of restock the treasure chest of what you might have to. You got to attach a pick if you're getting rid of Nurkic. You're going to need picks for a potential Jimmy Butler trade if you can get Bradley Beal to agree to it. There's logic behind it, but ultimately, I think people look at the Suns team around the league and they think, oh, this team's going to be a disaster just in terms of financials, what they'll be able to sustain, 3 years from now. I don't think they're going to recover by 6 years from now. So I actually think in terms of what Danny and everybody did yesterday, I think it's a brilliant gamble by them, because I'm with you. Like, that Cavs pick isn't going to be any good. Like, you can still get good players there, but it's not going to be any good. The Wolves pick might end up being good at 2029. You never know what's going to happen, but for the most part, they said, I don't think Phoenix is going to have it in 2031, and you're going to give us an unprotected pick. Like, those are the kind of moves that down the road you look back and you're like, I cannot believe somebody let the Jazz get that pick.
And I think, Zach, that's what you have to do if you're Ainge and Zanuck. I just don't think there's any other course. And, as you know, because we've talked to you about this, I honestly, and I don't have anything to confirm this, this is just what I believe in my heart, Zach, so I'm expressing this to you. That's it. I really believe that Danny Ainge was half joking and almost trolling people last offseason after the season ended. So his first media when he dropped the big game hunting line. I really think that there was a little trolling there. I think he was messing with people. And my feel is Justin Zanuck went, why would you say that? And I don't, because their first media prior to this year, Zanuck was a little salty. And he said, look, we tried. We tried to go get really good players. We called teams. The rumors around here were somebody in that front office was like, hey, let's sign Paul George and trade for Mikal Bridges. And I'm like, oh, go do that. If you can do that, go do that. Believe in your dreams and follow them, and may God guide you on your quest. There was no way they were going to be able to do that, but I'm sure they called and they realized that they're not right now in a position to bring in top shelf talent. Okay, how do we do that? We have to get a top 3 pick, and hopefully number 1, because they've been drafting late lottery, mid first round, and you can get good players, and they have. But when you're building a roster, you simply have to give yourself as many options as possible at one of the special picks that turns into the special player that actually changes your market. Can you get that in the first round? Yeah, you can. Mid-first round like a Giannis, but the best chance to get that is a top 3 pick. It just is.
Yeah, historically, that's where it happens the most, right? Like, and it doesn't mean there aren't exceptions to the rule. It doesn't mean you can't hit a home run by getting the 9th pick in a couple years in a row. But yeah, this is the way you do it. Like, I almost wonder, there are 2 things about that whole idea of Danny trolling everybody, which I love, is one, isn't it just fun to say? If you're Danny Ainge going to the offseason, you throw a wrench into everything by going, oh, by the way, we're going big game hunting this summer. Mm-hmm. It's just fun to say, and it is something that gets an excitement to a fan base that I don't know how it's not that Jazz fans are down on the franchise, but it's hard to get excited when you are picking 9th and you're just kind of, you're seeing all these other options. Like, you missed out on Wemby because of not tanking all this stuff. So I do think it kind of galvanizes a fan base into a little more excitement going into an off season. I think that's a smart PR move. The other part of it makes me wonder, he's got a real weird history with Pat Riley, and Pat Riley's always talked about going whale hunting when it comes to going and getting guys. I almost just wonder if he threw it out there just as a way of trolling Pat. It wouldn't shock me if he just was trolling Pat Riley in that moment.
Bravo. That's 3 levels deeper than my mind was going, Zach. Well done. And on the Phoenix side, as you kind of outlined, they've allocated so much of their cap to those 3 guys. This gives them, even though this is going to drive me crazy because everybody's saying it, but I'll use the buzzword optionality because I guess we have to now if you're covering the league. Right.
You're gonna get kicked out if you don't.
Exactly. So yes, I belong to the church of covering the league, so I'll use it. Optionality. So they can either add 3 young players on cheap contracts, or do you think this opens up a legitimate pathway to Jimmy Butler or something bigger?
I swear, I'm not trying to be mean here. What a stupid word.
I can't stand it. And everybody. And the goobs that don't know anything are the ones that come hey, well, this gives them a ton of optionality. I'm like, oh.
It's not a word.
But again, I guess we'll use it,
Yeah. No, you have to. But, I think that this is it's not about cheap contracts in the future to help round it. It's about going after Jimmy Butler. That's all this is. That is the home run play. That is the thing that could create enough to get them back on track. I think they're still chasing that 9-2 start. where it looked like, oh, this team's figured it out. I think there's a lot going on there. I think Ishbia is a very impulsive owner, and he has created a work environment. This is just me outside looking in, but prior to him owning the team, it felt like James Jones was a pretty pragmatic, smart front office guy. And since then, they've been wildly reckless, in my opinion. Now, I'm here for it. I think I'm here for taking big swings. I think it's a good idea. But this is about getting Jimmy Butler. And last night, as this deal goes down yesterday, and talking about it with certain people, and trying to get some understanding from behind the scenes of certain things going on. And so I just tried to work out a 3, 4, or 5 team deal to get Beal to Milwaukee, which has been rumored, to get Butler to Phoenix, and figure out where those other pieces go to make it work. Spence, I'm telling you, I worked on this thing on a trade machine for an hour and gave up because it was too complicated. I was like, I'll just wait for Hollinger to write it because I can't do this. Like, it's so complicated on how to make that work.
Yeah, and, we'll see, because they are going to need multiple teams, I think, and a team like the Jazz with clean books to absorb somebody's contract. And if you're the Jazz, you're in a good spot, because it's kind of like when they, it's funny and I'm not knocking on anybody, but if you don't follow the league and you get the alert on your phone, like the Jazz traded for Russell Westbrook, you kind of scratch your head and you go, what are we doing? But they also did it with Derrick Rose. So maybe the Jazz could be involved in a deal where a name comes here. And the Jazz also say, hey, if we're going to do this, you have to send us now a pick, right? We're not just taking them. And so the Jazz actually are in a decent spot to maybe stay involved in a complicated transaction like that is going to need multiple teams with multiple different optionality. There you go. Absolutely,
yeah, but a lot of optionality for sure. But yeah, that's what it is, right? Like, I think you're going to see teams like Detroit, Toronto, Utah, obviously. You're going to see teams really try to get in on this deal to get a pick out of it, right? And it's why you have the flexibility. It's why you have the optionality of all these situations. If you're those teams, it's because the smart ones, the smart front offices, find a way to get in on these big deals, and they get a pick out of it. And sometimes it's meaningful, and sometimes it's not. But why wouldn't you if you have that flexibility?
But in addition to optionality, Zach, did Phoenix just also give themselves more bites at the apple?
If you were talking about a front office in an ownership group that was looking for, different modes of how they could go, different bites of the apple, as you said, like, sure, but I don't see they've got a singular focus here. It's like they've got to they want to get rid of Nurk. I thought they made a really good trade for Nick Richards. Like, that was a nice pickup. And so they've got a little bit better at big man, but this is a Suns team that they are focused on Jimmy Butler, and that is from now until February 6th, that is what they're trying to do.
Who else is out there outside of Butler in your mind that is gettable and could actually make a team better? Any other hypothetical trades you're hearing about?
Yeah, I think the next name after that, I think people would assume like, oh, Brandon Ingram. I think all that Brandon Ingram stuff just completely cooled off, and maybe New Orleans is trying to find a way to retain him for much cheaper than what he was hoping to get. I would say the next big name is Cam Johnson. So Cam Johnson, there are teams after Cam Johnson right now. There are multiple teams, multiple contenders, teams that are trying to be contenders that look at him as, all right, let's put this dude at the 3 or the 4. He's a solid enough defender. He can really shoot the ball. He can do a little bit off the dribble. I think he's the other name that is if Jimmy doesn't get traded, I think that's probably the biggest or best player that gets moved.
What because we were talking about this earlier, and it was actually your buddy Haberstroh a couple of weeks ago who dropped the because around here the conversation continues like, hey, how long until they're serious about winning? How long until they're decent? And when you look at what Philly did when they did the whole trust the process with Sam Hinkie, it took them 5 years and a lot of misses until they got the luck they needed and matched that luck with the right player, and that was Embiid. And so ultimately we are here in Salt Lake City, year 3, we're 2.5 years into this thing. Is 5 years a reasonable? It's such a depressing thing to say into a microphone. It really is
such a long time.
It's depressing to say that into a microphone, but is that kind of like the ride you think this fan base is in for, generally speaking?
No, because I do think there's a point where you have that Hinkie thing was so, one, so hated around the NBA that I don't know that you can sell that a second time, no matter what the market is. Like, I just don't think you can, of just being so overt about it. Also, like, I don't think Danny has that in him, right? I don't think Justin Zanuck has that in him. I don't think, like, 5 years is a long time. I think the difference too in those is the Jazz up until this year, the previous 2 years, like, it was a pretty decent team, right? They weren't tanking out. They weren't in this process of 2.5 years right now in which they're getting high lottery picks and then seeing, all right, is this guy going to be a star? Like, they didn't fully commit to it. So maybe you get that this year and next year maybe, but I like, even then I wouldn't expect next year to go that way. I think if they get a guy, if they get, like, say they get the number one pick, they get Cooper Flagg, I think from there they're trying to build exponentially after that, because that just like that's how Danny Ainge runs teams.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, in 2031, when the Jazz get this Phoenix unprotected pick, I'm not sure Danny's like grinding. And, honestly, yeah. Zach, I really, and I'm not trying to, speak on something I'm not familiar with. It just feels like Zanuck is the guy that's really, doing the grinding day to day. And he kind of loops Danny in, probably oftentimes on a Zoom call when he's making the turn at Riverside Country Club. And he's like, hey, what do you think about this? And so ultimately, I don't know what this front office looks like 5 or 6 years down the road. Ryan Smith often talks about playing the long game, and the long game probably is what the only option is in order to get the right players and enough talent to compete with the best teams in pro basketball. But if they do finally, because the Jazz have been in the lottery 9 times, they've never moved up. Yeah. So if they finally get the luck they need and they snag Cooper Flagg, and next year your front court is Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, and Cooper Flagg. First of all, congratulations to this fan base for several reasons. Second of all, Zach, they've landed on the one option they were looking for. That building will be sold out every night. I can promise you that. Yeah. But then you finally can say, all right, okay, I think the fan base certainly would welcome a situation like that, because it is something tangible, Zach, and fans just need something tangible at times. And it's been a long time here since something really tangible is kind of at play.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that solves the problem of what is this supposed to be, right? If that happens, that solves that problem. And to your point, this is just me guessing, but as an educated guess, like, my guess is it's a shared vision between Danny and Justin, right? I think Danny's got maybe the grander form of it, and then Justin's just like, all right, well, this is my part of the vision, and I'm going to go, do that day-to-day stuff to, like, grind it out, right? So, like, I don't think Danny's in there crunching spreadsheets and everything. Like, I don't think that's happening, but I think that's the vision for both of them is once you get that guy, like, if they get Cooper Flagg, from there, you know how easy that is to sell this plan to the fan base? Of like, hey, we got the guy, we've got these other players, and now everything starts to fit in. Now those players you were getting with the 9th and 13th and 20 whatever picks over the last couple of years, they start to fit in around that number one guy, because that's what the whole point of this is. You have these, like, the point of drafting these guys is you just can't miss. If you get nothing but rotation players for the next 10 years and all these picks, that's a success, right? Like, you want the number one guy, you want that top dude. But if you can just never miss, you always have these guys, then guess what it does? It creates optionality for you in any trades or any future rotation building for them. And so, like, that's the key that they've been doing. I think they've done a good job of that in the draft too. Like, I don't know how many guys, obviously other than Taylor Hendricks because of that injury, I don't know how many guys you look at and you're just like, this dude has no chance of contributing down the road.
Yeah, Danny Ainge is Michael Scott, and Justin Zanuck is Jim Halpert. It's day-to-day versus big picture. That's just kind of the deal. All right, Jazz play OKC tonight, and I think it might be time, and maybe past time, to just be like, yep, there is one team that is head and shoulders above everybody else in the West. And your buddy Haberstraw on Monday of this week outlined very in great detail, as Tom does, how he believes there's a level that they haven't even approached. And, when you look at their net, it's historic. Houston's the second place team in the West, and they're 7 games back. So two-parter, is it time just to say, yep, we thought there was going to be a lot of parity. There's not, because OKC's that good. And do you agree with Tom that they have another level that they haven't even found yet?
I do agree that they have another level, right? Like, I mean, they've been doing all this pretty much without Chet Holmgren. He's at worst their third best player, right? Like, because I think Jalen Williams is exceptional. So he's at worst the third best player. They might be adding their second best player into the mix, however you want to, kind of parse that out. But there is a lot more that they can do, especially offensively. Like defensively, they're just unbelievable how they're playing defense every night in, night out. But there is another level. But I'm not sold on the idea that it's them and then everybody else in the West, because a healthy Mavericks team, they got better this offseason. They, and so did the Thunder, but they beat them pretty soundly in the postseason, right? Like this is still they have some experience under the belt now, but this is still a very inexperienced playoff team when it comes to the Thunder. So I would think a healthy Dallas team, and they're like, look, they've been playing better lately. Do you have an answer for Jokic? Like, I know how those regular season games have gone, but if you get into the playoffs and that team's healthy and it's, hey, Chet and Isaiah, you guys got to go stop Jokic, are you confident that that's going to happen? Like, I still think there's something with Denver there as well.
Do you think Denver does anything? Because, look, they have found a little something with this starting lineup. But, look, I've my deal with Westbrook. It hasn't changed in a long time. Like, you can have him. And if you want to win 4 times in 7 tries against a team in the postseason, I just don't believe he's going to shoot 43% from 3 like he has over the past 10 games. But it's worked for now as we approach February 6th. You think Denver's – and look, obviously that ownership group does not want to add payroll because they've done nothing but shed good players over the past couple of years. But do you feel like because they have the best player on the planet, they know they have a shot, so let's add a piece or two prior to February 6th?
Yeah, I mean, Tony Jones did some interesting reporting. Maybe I guess this was like a month and a half ago. But I think it was him and Sam Amick for us. Reported like some interest, probably hurting their already thin depth because of making contracts work and matching everything up. And so I don't ultimately think they do anything. Maybe they try to get somebody on the buyout market. But I think with the way that they've been playing, Jamal Murray looks great. Russell Westbrook, I'm with you on that stuff. But he has kind of found his role with that team, and at least for now, it looks pretty sound. And then there's just like you got Jokic playing the best basketball of his career, which is saying something. And I think that they look at this recent stretch and probably say, why would we want to disrupt what's happening right now? Look at what's happening.
Before I set you loose, I'm not going to ask you about the Cavs again. We revisit that every week, and I think most people still believe it's the Celtics conference to lose, and the Knicks continue to kind of stick around. But has Milwaukee – because, look, man, every time I lock in on a Bucks game and Giannis does the Giannis thing, I'm like, we have to talk about Milwaukee kind of the same way we talk about Denver, only because we've seen Giannis do it before. And they've been better as of late. What are you willing to say about their chances this year? And I know you're a huge Doc Rivers guy, so go ahead.
I am, yeah. Who's their 4th best player? Is it Brook?
Brook Lopez, probably.
Middleton?
Yeah.
I mean, can you count on Middleton to be available?
Nope.
So like that, I mean, that's the thing. Like, no, Brooks had a good career, and he's been really good in Milwaukee for his role. I just don't know how much you can keep counting on that. I mean, 5th best player, 6th best player, like it's such a thin roster and such a thin rotation. And so I don't know, like let's say they do move Middleton and they bring Bradley Beal in this, very complicated deal. It's a name. It's a guy who will probably be on the court more than Middleton will. Is it a reliable guy? Like, I think that if you could convince me that Chris Middleton's going to be healthy and they're going to be whole for the playoffs, yeah, I can see it. I don't think it's ridiculous to kind of guess that they could upset people and surprise people because Giannis is that good, and we've seen Dame do a lot of cool stuff in the postseason. But I don't think they're on the level of the Knicks. I definitely don't think they're on the level of the Celtics and the Cavs, and I'm not sure they're on the level of a healthy Magic team.
All right, Zach, appreciate the time, man. Good stuff. Have a great week and weekend. We'll chat soon.
Hey, just anytime you need me next week, I've got optionality for you.
Optionality. I'll have Porter send you a bunch of times, which gives you a lot of bites at the apple, okay?
Dolly, appreciate it.
All right, Zach Harper. He writes the NBA Power Rankings and Trade Primers for The Athletic and has a bunch of different podcasts going on. He's a hardworking dude. Get him on social media. @TalkHoops is where you find him. Jazz made a trade with the Suns as we were signing off last night, so broke that one down with Zach. We're going to bring in Neil Smith coming up, our weekly conversation with Neil, where we'll talk some NHL and some Utah Hockey Club. They're off tonight, but they're back in action tomorrow against Minnesota. Before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. It is the best place to get real money sports action. They've made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you have to do is pick a couple players, then more or less on their stat projections, and you win. So it's easier than figuring out the spread, the over-under, the money line, the hook, all the terms you need to know if you're simply betting on games. And they're offering you a free square, so you only have to get 2 players right. And for the NFC Championship, they're offering you Jaden Daniels only needs 1 passing yard, and you win the square. So you have to get 1 other player, and you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. For Buffalo KC, will Patrick Mahomes throw for more than 253 yards? Will Travis Kelce have more than 69 yards receiving? Will Josh Allen rush for more than 48 yards? Philly, Washington, which is your NFC Championship game. Jalen Hurts rushing for more than 31 yards. Will Saquon Barkley rush for a touchdown? Now, check Prize Picks for up-to-date player projections prior to kickoff coming up on Sunday. But in the meantime, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly. After you play your first $5 lineup, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly. After you play your first $5 lineup, Prize Picks run your game all season long. All right, Neil Smith's going to join us coming up next, and then we will bid you good afternoon for Utah basketball against Houston. Going to be a tough task for Craig and that team. We'll have to see how it goes. But new year, new you, new budget, save some money. You can save money on your wireless, your internet, and your cable television with the Dish Professionals if you give them a call at 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Great opportunities right now. The promotions are as good as they've ever been. And, guys, I'll tell you, this is the opportunity you've been looking for. Call us up. Take advantage of this Netflix offer that Dish is stacked on top of its 2-year promotion. You get Netflix free for the next 2 years. This is worth $370 plus. On top of the 2 years worth of huge credits, we'll throw in movie channels and dinner at JCW's along with free professional install. Listen, if you're a cable customer, a YouTube customer, maybe a DirecTV customer, you're probably seeing your bill jump a lot. 20% in some instances. Guys, listen, if you're getting less or the same and paying more, call us up, get something better for less money. And with the knowledge of knowing that the price isn't going to go up, that's going to save you a ton of money. And this is where we've seen customers saving not just a few $100s, but we're talking $3,000 to $4,000 over the next couple of years just by making the switch. Plus, you get the biggest DVR out there, auto hops commercials. It'll auto record your team's games. And guys, here's the thing. You won't delete your recordings unless you ask it to. Call us up, upgrade. Also, ask about our internet options. We've got a half a dozen different internet providers. I've got fiber in some areas at $35. I've got this new fiber internet that we have that is $45 a month. A lot of areas you actually might be able to pay a different provider for the actual same fiber. So if your fiber bill went up or your internet, call us up. We can switch you to another provider, use the same fiber, and maybe save $20-30 a month. Call us 424-DISH. It's 801-424-3474.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Neil Smith stops by for a little Utah Hockey Club. Then we'll turn you over to Bill Riley and Sean Mooney. It's Utah versus Houston, little men's college basketball coming your way on a Wednesday right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. We got a busy afternoon and a busy evening on the radio station. We're about to say good afternoon to you in just about 20 minutes or so as the Utah men's basketball team take on the Houston Cougars. Houston's a national championship contender, so Craig and his team are going to have a tough task. And then after that, Utah women welcome in Kansas to the Huntsman Center tonight here in Salt Lake City. The Jazz are off. Utah Hockey Club. The Jazz are playing the Thunder. It's the Hockey Club who are off, but they won a couple of home games before hitting the road to take on the Wild. Our next guest joins us on a weekly basis to talk a little hockey. It is Neil Smith on a Wednesday afternoon. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Good, Spence. How you doing?
I'm good. Before we get to the Utah Hockey Club, I wanted to ask you, so Alex Ovechkin is about to break Wayne Gretzky's career goal record, which is a record, Neil, that I think most people believed was extremely safe. I wanted you to give our audience some context because we always talk about who the GOAT is in this sport or that sport or what have you, and it feels like the one sport where there is no debate is hockey, right? How big is the gap between Wayne Gretzky and whoever else would be second on your list as far as the greatest hockey player ever?
I think it's quite a bit, and it depends whether you're talking about all offense or guys that have changed the game like Bobby Orr or people like Gordie Howe that were in a totally different era. But I think if you want to talk about dominating, just total domination of the game, you got to go to Gretzky. Nobody has dominated the game offensively like he did for all those years in Edmonton and then in L.A. for quite a number of years. I remember being at a game in Hartford, Edmonton in Hartford, and I wrote on my report, I said, it's just not fair. Every time he gets on the ice, they've got 3 or 4 scoring chances. Like the other team has no chance. And it was like a man with all boys. He just an unbelievable thing. I'm glad that I lived in that era to watch him. So,
Igor Shesterkin tried to fight Brady Tkachuk during the Rangers win, and it didn't go well, Neil. First of all, why would you do that? Because you can't drop your gloves. And are there unwritten rules out there for hockey players? Like, dude, don't punch the goalie. Like, it seemed like an odd move by Shesterkin to me.
Yeah, it was, and there's no reason for a guy that's that important to his team. I guess he's got a temper like we all do, but Brady Tkachuk is going to get under everybody's skin. That's what he does. He's a unicorn of a player. He's a very special player. He's very talented. He to put it in context of when you were a kid watching those Ranger teams, he's got Asa Tikkanen in him and got a little bit of Messier in him. So he's got both things. Mess wasn't the irritating guy. Mess could just take care of business. Brady Tkachuk just drives you nuts, sort of like his brother does in Florida.
How many? And like his dad did, right? Isn't he Keith's kid?
Yeah, he's Keith's boy, and Keith was a big power forward, and those two hanging around locker rooms their whole childhood, I guess, is rubbed off the right way because they're both great players.
Yeah, they are. Liam O'Brien here for the Utah Hockey Club, Spicy Tuna, as he's known to the fan base, he's a very popular player here. He got in a fight with a Blues player. He got his clock cleaned, and blood was spilling down his face, and he skated off the ice to a rousing round of applause from the fan base, and the hockey club actually scored 3 goals right after that. How are the fighters on each team, like, established? Because it seems like the fighter on this team seems to be Liam O'Brien.
Yeah, well, he's their tough guy. If it's not like the old days where there was real fighting. This is scrapping, but it's everybody's got a shield on, so you're not and a helmet, so you're not getting in many blows. Mostly it's takedowns. Whoever goes down, the other guy won. But there is sometimes when you get some punches in there, and it's well established in the pecking order that the management will look to have at least 1 or 2 guys in their lineup, or that can go in their lineup, that can deter any kind of liberties that another team might try to take with your team.
Who was, when you were, running clubs, who was, I'll say, the most feared dude? Like, as far as the fighter where you're like, don't mess with that guy because he might kill you. Who was the best, like most feared fighter around pro hockey back then?
Well, I'll name a number of them. I mean, I think that they were Bob Probert, Joe Koser, both played for Detroit for a long time, and then Joey won the cup with us in '94. Ty Domi was a guy that was just crazy enough that he'd take on anybody, and he wasn't very big for that era. I got to put those three. There's a couple of guys in St. Louis. Kelly Chase was pretty darn tough, and every team had one. But I'd say the most feared guys were Bob Probert and Joey Koser.
How are fights used as far as if they're used at all when it comes to the strategy? Because like I said, the hockey club really responded to our guy Spicy Tuna getting his clock cleaned. Is it a real thing where, a coach will point to the tough guy, the fighter, and say, okay, go scrap a little bit. We need our guys to get motivated?
They don't have to say that to that guy. I mean, they're usually fourth-line players, and when you put them out on the ice and you're going against the other fourth line, and the other fourth line also has a tough guy, a lot of times they look at each other and go, okay, we know what's going to happen here, because the game is at a point where, that's going to perhaps give an edge to one team or the other based upon the adrenaline rush of, your Goliath beating their Goliath or whatever. And as I said, Spencer, there's very little of it today as opposed to, in the 90s or early 2000s. But there's still some of it in there. The problem is that usually really tough guys aren't great players. And so if you can't skate today, you can't play in the league. You've got to be a real good skater to be able to play in the league. And usually those guys weren't the greatest skaters.
One more fight question. I don't know why it's on the mind today. Just a bunch of highlights, I suppose. But I'm genuinely curious. Like, Wayne Gretzky never fought. And it seems like a lot of Ovechkin's a pretty tough kid. There's no doubt about that. But are there, like, unwritten hockey rules, like Clayton Keller, first line Utah forward, would a team send their tough guy after him? Or that's like, no, he's a little dude. He doesn't fight. Leave him alone.
Yeah, they wouldn't send a tough guy after him to fight him. But what would happen is if the other team ran Keller into the boards or gave him a dirty check or a hit from behind or stuck a knee out or anything that might hurt him, the rest of the team will come to his defense and jump the guy. We had it happen. I was at a game of the Islanders in Philadelphia, and Siplikov of the Islanders threw a head check, meaning a shoulder to a head of Paling on Philadelphia. And boy, the Philadelphia Flyers just all jumped him all at once, trying to pay him back. They weren't able to do it, but he was suspended for 3 games for the hit. You still get that in hockey. If your teammates are supposed to jump in and have your back.
So Clayton Keller got hit by a puck against Winnipeg and came back with this massive shiner and actually scored a goal in Utah's win. Have you ever been hit by a puck? That does not feel good.
No, it does not feel good, or getting hit even by a stick. But getting hit by a puck, by a shot, that can knock you out. And that's a typical hockey player, though. Come back and play, even though you've taken a few stitches during the game.
So the Utah Hockey Club hits the road, and you and I discussed this. They had this 7-game homestand that's now behind them, and they went 3-4. So could be worse, but we were hoping for more home results. Before we move on to what's next, what do you make of the homestand that we just saw with the Utah Hockey Club?
Well, I think it's great that they beat St. Louis, and I think it's fantastic that they were able to beat the Winnipeg Jets. You and I have talked about it infinitum on here. Anytime you can put back-to-back wins together, that sends you into Minnesota with a pretty good feeling. And I'm sure today they travel to Minnesota all together, and they've got to do a back-to-back 2 games in under 48 hours when they play Minnesota, and then go north and play Winnipeg the next night in Winnipeg. And then, of course, after that, they get a day off, but they got to fly all the way to Ottawa, Ontario, and have an afternoon game with the Ottawa Senators. So, they got a tough 3 games coming up, 3 games in 4 nights, but they're coming off of 2 wins, and that should be good news. They're going in there knowing they can beat teams, and they know they could beat the Winnipeg Jets, which they did on Monday night.
And they're a good road team, unfortunately tied with both Vancouver and San Jose for the worst home record as far as wins. All three of those teams have 8, but 12 wins on the road. You know, that's a good, solid road record. Nobody in the Pacific has 12 wins on the road. The Vegas Knights have 11. But ultimately, as we come to this point of the season, Neil, we're used to the basketball grind around here, and this is the time of year where it's like, all right, we're pretty much halfway through the NBA season. And in pro basketball, this is the time where I think a lot of the guys look around and say, I need a bit of a break from you. I need to go somewhere for a while, whether it's players, whether it's coaches, whether it's the front office, whether it's staff members, whether it's broadcasters. What's the grind like this time of year in pro hockey? What's the challenge to keep these players motivated?
Yeah, you know, it's February where there's a February sort of blues. It's the month that's not quite close enough to the playoffs and far enough away from the beginning, and the standings seem settled in. But this year, because of the Four Nations face-off that they're going to have, pitting Swedish players versus Finnish players versus Canadians versus Americans, they are going to get some time off here, and that's going to be in that fourth week of February. There's going to be some time off for the anybody who's not playing in that tournament, which is the majority of the league, of course. So maybe that will restart their engines. But it's typical, Spence. This is the time of year in February where everybody, you sort of got the blues. It's just a grind.
It sure is. And before I set you loose for today, we'll say Utah Hockey Club halfway through the year. The Neil Smith, you can give us a letter grade. You can rank them 1 through 10. Now that we have pretty much half the season, what do you have to say about the way the hockey club has played so far, and maybe a message of hope for the second half of the year?
Well, I'm hopeful for the second half of the year with them, but I think they are where I thought they'd be, which is just over 500, NHL 500, and they're in the discussion to make the wild card spot. They're not out of that discussion. They're in it. They're only a -7 on total goal differential from goals for and goals against. The home record is the dark spot for them, because if they'd just gone 500, that would give them 3 more wins, and they'd be well into the wild card discussion. But you know what? I think if they have a good second half, there's no reason why they can't, be competing, as I said, for that 8th or 7th spot. And I graded for them so far, I'd say a B, because they haven't been spectacular, but they've been good for moving out of Arizona, coming to a new city, coming to a new town, a new arena, new fans, and they're where I thought they would be. And so I give them a B for doing that.
Neil, where can our new hockey fans around Hockeytown, USA, that's what I'm calling Salt Lake, all due respect to Detroit, where can they go? Where can they go find your pod?
Any podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, any of them out there, YouTube, and please just subscribe. And we need to get as many downloads as we can, because that's the game in the podcast world. But I know if you listen to our podcast, you will learn things. We have tremendous guests, and we may not be as polished as Spence Checketts, but we're pretty close.
I don't know about that, Neil, but I do appreciate your time, because we learn every time you're on this show. So have a great weekend, and we'll chat soon.
I look forward to it.
All right, Neil Smith, former general manager of the New York Rangers, New York Islanders, high-level scout for the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit is Hockeytown, USA. Of course I kid. So appreciate Neil's time. I just don't understand why, if you're a goalie, you decide to fight when you literally can't drop your gloves. Like this, I'll call it a highlight video of Igor Shesterkin trying to fight Tkachuk. Like, he skates over there, and Tkachuk looks at him and then just punches him squarely in the face. And he's like, what are you doing? You
can barely move, but you're trying to throw down. I kind of respect it, though. You look like a Decepticon or something, walking around like a goalie with those big pads on. You're probably not going to take much damage either, so why not?
Yeah, I guess you can respect it, because you're literally skating over to a player knowing you're about to be punched right in the face, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
You either respect it, or you're like, what are you doing? This will not end well.
Not ideal strategy, but hey, It's hockey. That's what we're here for.
Indeed, we are here for it. All right, Utah men's basketball coming up on the other side. Utah takes on Houston. The Utes are a 17.5-point underdog, and that actually moved down. It opened up with Houston favored by 18.5 points. After Utah-Houston, you're going to hear the Utah women take on Kansas here in Salt Lake City. Houston is really, really good. There's your analysis for the game coming up. Houston is a national championship contender. They have players that have played in the program for a number of years. They have a few transfers, and they are undefeated in conference. They trounced Brigham Young at their place, 86-55. Smoked TCU. They beat K-State by 30. They beat West Virginia by 26. They are coming off a close win at UCF, 69-68. But in non-conference, they took number 9 Alabama right down to the stretch. Bama is one of the best teams in the country. Auburn, number 1 team in the country. Houston played them, lost by 5. Their one loss right now that kind of stings them. San Diego State's a good team, but they went to San Diego State and they lost. Houston 14-3 overall. They're 6-0 in conference play. And the Utes trying to ride momentum after that win over Brigham Young here in Salt Lake over the weekend. They've won 3 straight games, and they're 3-3 in Big 12 play after beating OK State, TCU, and BYU following that 4-game losing streak. So we'll see if Utah can keep it up. I'm not expecting the Utes to win this game, but a good showing, keep it close down the stretch. And I think that's something that this team can fly home with some confidence for before taking on Baylor coming up in just 3 days on Saturday. Couple home games. It's Baylor, then it's Cincinnati before hitting the road at OK State. All right, Porter, let's get out of here. But before we say good afternoon for Bill Riley, Sean Mooney, and Utah men's basketball, what comes our way on a Thursday edition of the show?
Yeah, you mentioned it, a double header on the hoop side following us here in a moment. But tomorrow on the show, we'll talk some college hoops. Ken Pomeroy is going to join the program. I believe he's going to be in studio, so we may spend an hour with one Ken Palm. Amy Donaldson will stop by the program. Tim McMahon stops by the program, and depending on who's in studio, who's not, what time we have, we'll probably try to get an NFL guest to talk some playoffs as well.
Good stuff. It did become official. Real Salt Lake has transferred Gavin Beavers onto a Dutch club after signing Rafael Cabral, the Brazilian keeper, who probably will start for the soccer club. All right, we'll say goodnight. Special thank you today, Zach Harper and Neil Smith. If you missed any of it, go to the website, check out our podcast page, and download our app. Bill Riley, Sean Mooney, coming up next. Utah men's basketball against Houston. Have a great Wednesday night. Talk to you on the drive tomorrow, right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.